China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. They are working together to trying to disrupt the rule-based world order that serve everyone's interest to advance the human prosperity. When they work together, the fellow democracies, including Taiwan, Israel, United States, we need to stand in solidarity. We need to stand in unity.
Hello and welcome to State of a Nation. I'm Eylon Levy. Israel, Ukraine and Taiwan. Three democracies under existential threat. And the latter, Taiwan, has proven one of Israel's most vocal and staunchest allies in the October 7th war. It looks at Israel, it sees itself, it looks at Israel and it sees threats to its own security. That's why I wanted to speak with today's guest, Representative Yaping Abby Lee. She's the de facto ambassador of Taiwan in Israel, but she's not technically an ambassador for reasons we will unpack. She heads the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office, the de facto embassy of Taiwan in Israel. Together we look at why October 7th was a wake-up call for Taiwan in a way that meant it actually donated money to IDF soldiers after October 7th. We look at what it means to be a democracy under existential threat, and why democracies around the world should stand with Israel and, as the representative says, Taiwan. And we look at the role of disinformation in undermining democracy, undermining the US-led world order, and in particular, the malicious involvement of TikTok. It was a fascinating conversation, and you're going to find it extremely educational and enlightening. Join me beyond the headlines and between the lines. Welcome to State of a Nation.
Breaking news out of Israel this morning.
Shocking hostage taking.
Hundreds of Israelis are dead.
I want to bring in Israeli government spokesman.
What happens when the 4-day pause?
How do you resolve this?
Where does this go?
Hello and welcome to State of a Nation.
Thank you for having me with you.
You are Taiwan's representative in Israel, but you're not an ambassador, and the organization that you head is not an embassy. So by way of introducing our listeners to what Taiwan is, tell me why that is.
Thank you for the opportunity to be with you here today. Despite the fact that Taiwan and Israel don't have official diplomatic relations, the substantive relationship is important. That's why my office functions as a de facto embassy here to fostering the partnership encompasses a broad range of collaborations. I'm very honored to represent Taiwan and people of Taiwan to fostering this important partnership and friendship between two countries and between peoples. Taiwan is a young democracy. Our democracy came a long way. It's a long path from autocracy for full democracy. Second aspect I also want to introduce Taiwan is economy. Economically, we also came a long way, making ourselves irreplaceable and indispensable partner in global supply chain in modern technology. We are a reliable partner for global prosperity. And the third perspective is Taiwan's democracy is under threat. We have been standing on the front line to dealing with tremendous challenges on our survival, but we intend to preserve our democracies, and we will continue to work with like-minded partners to keep the peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, and most importantly, the linchpin of the global peace and stability is on the peaceful status quo of Taiwan Strait.
And that's exactly what I want to unpack with you in this episode. The threats to Taiwan, the threats to Israel, how you see them as being interlinked from your perspective in Taipei. But for listeners who are less familiar with Taiwan, will have heard of Taiwan, know that there is such a thing as a one China policy, that there is this other China that isn't recognized internationally as an independent state. Give us a crash course on the history of Taiwan and what its international status is as the Republic of China, different from the People's Republic of China, with its capital in Beijing.
I'm not sure whether you ever heard the term called reunification, that Beijing government always claim that reunification with Taiwan is the ultimate goal of the Beijing government to fulfill its rejuvenation of a Chinese dream. But if you look at reunification, the term itself is information manipulation for us in terms of reality. The real part, Taiwan never belonged to China, and PRC never rule or have its jurisdiction over Taiwan for a single day. So the real part is information manipulation. We never unify together how we can be reunified. Taiwan and Beijing, the ROC and PRC, we don't have a jurisdiction over each other. Taiwan is independent by reality, but unfortunately, we have seen Beijing leadership, Beijing government distort the United Nations resolution number 2758 to misleading the international society of its own one China principle, and want to suffocate and swallow Taiwan into its sovereignty. If you visit Taiwan, you have to apply your visa from our office, not from the PRC of embassy here. So it's very evident and very apparent that Taiwan is not part of China.
So you have Taiwan based on an island off the coast of China, the two having splintered essentially during the Civil War, during the Second World War. And Taiwan, in the early years, recognized internationally as the China, and then countries changed the recognition to the People's Republic of China. And that's how we have a situation now where Taiwan is not broadly recognized as an independent state, although it's de facto an independent country, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, you are correct. It also needs to go back to the United Nations resolution number 2758 in 1971, when the UN passed the resolution. It only said that PRC represent China's seat in the UN, but it did not say that the PRC represent Taiwan in the UN. And the resolution only regulate that the Mao Zedong, the PRC, is the only legitimate power to represent Chinese people in the UN. But at that time, due to the complexity of the history, our delegation in the UN at that time, in fact, Taiwan is the founding member of UN. We have to leave the United Nations to protect this unjust resolution. Since then, we try to return to UN to contribute to the society, but due to the bully and the blockade from PRC, we are not successfully to achieve this course yet.
Interesting. So I imagine Taiwan has similar criticism to Israel regarding the United Nations.
We are not easy countries internationally. Yeah.
Okay, so let's have a look at this. So you are the representative of Taiwan in Israel, not the ambassador, because Israel doesn't recognize Taiwan as an independent state, but still retains these relations that aren't technically diplomatic. Now, since October 7th in particular, we've seen a real divergence between the policy of Beijing and Taiwan towards the state of Israel and the war. China increasingly clear that it is aligning with Russia and Iran, and I want to get your thoughts on what Beijing is trying to achieve in the region. But from Taiwan, we saw not only a statement of support on October 7th, you actually donated money. You donated humanitarian aid to Israeli soldiers, to families in need. Tell me, what did Taiwan do after October 7th? And how do you read the current situation? What's your policy in the region?
Yeah, Taiwan was among the first country to express our solidarity and condolence after October 7th. The political support from very top level of our politicians, including our president, the then President Tsai Ing-wen, tweet about the condolence and the staunch support and solidarity with the state of Israel. For the government perspective or in the diplomacy, we see the war itself is a conflict of two different civilizations. It's a war between authoritarian versus democracy. It's a clash of ideology. Taiwan, we are always be referred as David in the East. Two countries, when we establish, we face existential challenges to our survivals. So the people in Taiwan, the government see the reflection in Israel. So that's why the solidarity remains very staunch and very solid until now. Myself, when we see the harrowing October 7th, actually we also see the resilience of the people, strength, the bravery of the people and the soldiers. We think this part of civilians might be neglected during the wartime because all the focus and tension are put on the war itself. We think it's about the time to show that Taiwan is your reliable partner. Taiwan is your partner in the long journey of healing the trauma, to restore the hope. So we decided to come out of the cooperative projects. In the beginning of the war, we worked with the NGO here to provide humanitarian relief, those necessity goods for the evacuees from the south, from the north. We also work with Kibbutz Pamahim to provide ocean psychological therapies for those residents of communities along the Gaza Strip. So far, we have been providing the therapies for 1,500 people affected by war, or those parents who lost their children in the Nova musical festivals. And we also work with NGOs to provide the support in science education in the Negev region, and also the digital capacity building for the Druze retired soldiers. And so far, we budget about $1.5 million to work broadly and extensively with different NGOs to fostering the partnership, the friendship. We think our donation is not just the financial one. We want to send a very strong message that Taiwan stands with Israel. Taiwan stands with Israeli people.
And that's definitely an extraordinary message, because I can't think of any other country that has actually provided humanitarian aid to the Israeli people. We get harangued about humanitarian aid to Gaza. I can't think of another country that is asking, well, what about the Israelis who suffered from October 7th? I want to get your sense of how you see the similarities between Israel and Taiwan. You've spoken about Taiwan being a country under existential threat. Can you elaborate on that?
This is the first similarity between Taiwan and Israel. When we founded our nations, we has been dealing with tremendous challenges externally. Our democracy isn't come an easy way, but we intend to preserve that. Taiwan and Israel are both shining beacon of democracies in the Middle East and in the East Asia Pacific region. So we become the testing ground for democracy. This is the first threat that we are being facing from outside, how to make our society united and how to maintain the plurality of the societies to consolidate our democratic way of life. This is the first challenges Taiwan nowadays is facing. And the second challenging, of course, the military coercion and intimidation from China. And we have been dealing with military intimidation for many years, so it's not a news for Taiwanese, but certainly the Chinese government has dialed up the military pressure on Taiwan. For instance, every day they sending the aircraft to intrude our airspace and vessels to intrude our waters, to try to coerce Taiwan and through gray zone activities, and also launched a massive disinformation campaign and cyber attacks on Taiwan. For instance, whenever we have an election, we will see a huge interference intervention from Beijing government. We are the young democracy again. We have the first president election in 1996. During the first presidential election, China launched the missile tax, trying to intimidate Taiwanese people, to coerce Taiwanese people not to vote, not to elect your own head of state, your own leaders. So we have been dealing with military pressure from Taiwan. And nowadays, we see the intimidation is like a hybrid one. This incorporates the military power and also the disinformation campaign and cyber attack. For instance, every day in Taiwan, we encounter 5 million cyber attacks from mainland China.
5 million cyber attacks a day?
Yes, from mainland China. And there's a statistic that the cyber attacks aiming on Taiwan takes about 50% of total cyber attacks happening in Asia Pacific region. So it's a flashpoint in terms of military confrontation and also the cyber one.
I definitely see the similarities with Israel, therefore, in terms of a country that fears an invasion from a neighbor, that is coming under cyber attacks, that is trying to build its own democracy. And I wonder then, Israeli society is very resilient. Mm-hmm. Israelis are unfortunately well trained what to do when there is a siren, how to run to shelter, and what to do in an emergency, and people are used to getting called up in the reserves. Mm-hmm. Is it similar in Taiwan? Do your buildings have bomb shelters as well? Do you have emergency drills, emergency reserves and conscription? How is Taiwanese society mobilized to deal with these external threats? Mm-hmm.
This is a very good question. When we see the resilience of a society, the strength of people in Israel, we have a lot of implications for the whole of society preparedness here in Israel. If we look at October 7th, the first broad and strategic message we learned from this tragic event is we have to be better prepared to prevent such a tragedy being replicated in Taiwan. It's always like a wake-up moment for Taiwan to see that even in modern age, bully or aggressor still not hesitate to use force to coerce, to annex the other one. So this is a big lesson we learned from Israel, and we know that the society resilience is crucial to the survivals. So the government in Taiwan, we have adopted the strategy of deterrence, and the strategy of deterrence comes within 3 layers. The first layer is the determination and will to defend our homeland, including the society resilience you just mentioned, to mobilize the reserve officers.
Do you have conscription, mandatory
military service? We have
military
mandatory
service?
conscription only for men, not for women. So far, 1 year conscription period for males in Taiwan. So the mobilization of a reserve force, the society resilience, including the public and private sectors partnership here. For instance, your medical emergency, the cooperation between Magen-David Adom and the hospital and the Ministry of Health Care is always a good experience, good lessons for Taiwan to learn in dealing with the contingency. So we have been learning a lot from Israel's experience, and whole of society resilience is also the field that we hope we can enhance our cooperation.
And I know that you've written before that part of Taiwan's deterrence against China is not only military deterrence, but economic. That Taiwan is so central to the global economy, in particular with regard to the global semiconductor industry and supply chain, that the costs of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, which they see as reunification, and you object to that term, the costs of an invasion would be economically disastrous for the People's Republic of China and for the whole world. And I wonder, you've spoken about things that Taiwan can learn from Israel. Does Israel have anything to learn from Taiwan in terms of making itself economically indispensable so that our allies cannot throw us under a bus and will remain committed to our security at a time that there is pressure to abandon us?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. Taiwan, we have been doing a lot to keep critical technology at home and also to increase our scientific and technological relevance with like-minded countries. Taiwan, we manufacture about 92% of high-end semiconductor chips, and also about 60% of semiconductor chips globally. We consider the semiconductor industry is another silicon shield for Taiwan's safety. And just as you mentioned that, if the peaceful stability status quo of Taiwan Strait got disrupted, the global supply chain will got disrupted, and everyone in the world, including PRC, have to suffer the consequences. And this is a very expensive cost for everyone in the globe, including the PRC. According to the statistics, if there is a war happening in Taiwan Strait and Taiwan cannot manufacturing the semiconductor chips and or other ICT-related equipment, the global GDP have to be decreased about 10 trillion US dollars. This is a huge cost for the global economy. Also, the comprehensive ecosystem of semiconductor industry is not easy. We have to spend about 3 decades, 30 years to rebuild the comprehensive ecosystem of semiconductor industry in Taiwan as it is today. So we always hope the Beijing leadership can be pragmatic and be smart enough to think about the consequences. If they use force to annex Taiwan, it will cause a big loss of the global economy. Also a big blow. They need to also suffer the consequences themselves.
Of course, Israel also thought before October 7th, it would be madness for our enemies to attack us because look how much they would suffer. They would have to be lunatics. And they did attack on October 7th, and it turned out they were lunatics. And knowing that they would suffer a cost is not enough. But I think there's a salutary lesson there that when you talk about reinforcing your international position, it's not about appealing to sympathy. It's not about appealing to identification. It is about making yourself indispensable. And one thing that, from our perspective, Israel has to do is make itself indispensable to the West so it cannot be abandoned. And so I wonder from your perspective, I see how you look at Israel and see Taiwan in the mirror. You're encouraging Israelis to look in the mirror and see Taiwan. But it's one thing to identify and another thing to really stick your neck out and support. So I wonder, how do you see Israel's security in the Middle East as being important to Taiwan's interests? And in particular, we spoke about existential threats to Taiwan, existential threats to Israel from Iran, obviously existential threats to Ukraine from Russia. How do you see these 3 countries, Israel, Taiwan, Ukraine, being connected in terms of their importance to the Western alliance and the free world?
Yeah, I think it is very apparent that the geotheaters are indivisible nowadays. We are living in a war that are more interconnected than ever. If there is a contingency in Middle East, in Israel, other countries also need to prepare for the possibility or the potential of the conflict or contingency in their own region. We see the very strong establishment of axis of upheavals, the axis of evils, including China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. They are working together to trying to disrupt the rule-based order that serve everyone's interest to advance the human prosperity. When they work together, the fellow democracies, including Taiwan, Israel, United States, We need to stand in solidarity. We need to stand in unity to defend the democratic way of life, to defend the trustworthy supply chain. We see the contingency in Middle East certainly has a fallout in Indo-Pacific region, the region that Taiwan is located. It's also the same is also applied to the situation in Ukraine. When we see Russia invasion Ukraine, we also watch the situation closely in Taiwan. We know that Beijing regime, Iran regime also watch closely to learn what kind of consequences they will experience if they launch an attack on Israel, if they launch an attack on Taiwan. We know that Beijing has come into Russia to learn how can they circumvent the economic sanction if they use force to attack Taiwan and the Western democracies impose the sanction on them. I'm sure that they are learning from each other's playbook. When they work together, our democracy need to speak in one voice. We need to be more united than ever.
Interesting. So you see the connection between Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan not only being a question of identification and empathy with a fellow democracy under threat, but about standing up for the rules-based order. And it sounds funny to say it from an Israeli perspective because we're so often accused of breaking the rules-based order. We say that's because you're twisting what the rules actually are and you're not reading international law properly. But the importance is actually showing that there are consequences to aggression. There are consequences to attempts to invade and overrun another country, and that those countries are learning from each other in the same way that I think here in the Middle East, terrorists are learning from each other about what tactics are working. I want to get your take. We have a clip here from an episode we filmed a few months ago with the French philosopher Bernard-Henri Lévy, who has also been very vocal about the need to protect democracies under existential threat. He joined me here on State of a Nation, and he had this to say.
But I can predict you something today. If Israel does not win the war over Hamas, and if Ukraine does not recuperate her territory against Putin, you will have an invasion of Taiwan.
Do you agree with this statement?
I think they will give a wrong signal to the other side. If Israel cannot prevail, if Taiwan cannot prevail, I believe democracy will not prevail. It will give the other side, the authoritarian regime, more bigger appetite to use the force to coerce or intimate the other world not to exercise their basic rights. So I think our survival is not only important to our country, our people, but our survival also critical imperative to the continuing democracy in the world. Nowadays, we see a lot of messaging saying that democracy doesn't deliver, democracy only leads to chaos. That's the message that the other camp want to spread out, the distrust of democracy, distrust of the government in those democracies. So I think not only that Israel and Taiwan, we have to show our determination, our will to defend our country. Also, our international partners also need to maintain the consistency in global messaging that in the 21st century, we don't want to lead back our society back to the society without freedom, society without democracy, or society without free elections. This is a very critical moment for every democracy to stand firm on the position by supporting Taiwan, by supporting Israel. By supporting other democracies, they are under threats.
Okay, I understand why Taiwan is supporting Israel in this conflict and more generally. You see it as an alliance of shared values as democracies under threat. You think that if Israel's enemies were to, God forbid, win this war, it would send the wrong message to China, to Russia, to Iran as well. I understand Taiwan's interests in the region. Help me understand the People's Republic of China. What does Beijing want in this region? Because it wasn't so long ago that Prime Minister Netanyahu referred to the economic relation with China as being a match made in heaven, and Israel and China were warming relations. And since October 7th, I think it's been quite clear that China has been aligning itself with the Russia, Iran, North Korea axis, even hosting reconciliation talks between Fatah and Hamas in Beijing. How do you understand Beijing's interests in the Middle East and what it is trying to achieve and do in this war?
I think it's very clear for Beijing to stand with Iran to make United States look bad in the battle here. Its goal is to replace United States' supremacy in Middle East. There are a couple of perspectives in their strategy. Number one is to maintain the energy security, and they get a very cheap oil from Iran to help Iran circumvent international sanction. So they get a cheap oil energy from Iran, and also it's important for them to maintain their energy security in the region. But most likely, they would like to ally with we call the Global South communities and other countries to showcase that Beijing or China is a better alternative for United States.
Interesting. So you think that the reason that China has essentially taken the opposing side in this war is as a way of undermining the United States, not just securing energy for itself, but specifically undermining the Western order, and therefore for the United States to support Israel is part of supporting its own international system against attempts at Chinese revisionism?
Yeah, also I think they also take advantage of war to test the credibility of United States military alliance or security alliance in Middle East. If they see United States doesn't show enough assurance to the alliance or security relationship with Israel, they also will think there's opportunity for them to do the same task in the Taiwan Strait.
So this is a way for China to test the solvency of the United States' partnership with other countries and see to what extent are Western countries truly committed to the defense of their allies?
Yeah, you are correct.
And what lesson do you think that China is taking from the way that our Western allies have handled this war?
We hope China can be clear that they have to pay an expensive cost if they want to disrupt the current rule-based orders. Fellow democracies certainly will stand in solidarity to defend the expansion of authoritarian regime from the contingency or the escalation in the Taiwan Strait, and also based on the escalation of a security situation in Middle East. I think the fellow democracies show a very clear message that we want to maintain the current status quo. We want to maintain the rule-based liberal international orders. We send a very clear message. Israel also sent a very clear message of your determination to defend your homeland, your determination to defend democracies. We know that we don't take the support of our partners for granted. We have to show the strength first. And Israel showed very high level of strength to the enemies and to the partners. I think the other side also get the signal clearly.
One of the things that's been concerning me in this war has been the way that other countries have in fact been encouraging Iranian-Palestinian aggression by sending the wrong signals. For example, decisions by Malta, Spain, Ireland, Norway to recognize a non-existent Palestinian state, which sends them the message that October 7th works. But more than that, I testified in front of the Canadian Parliament about this alongside international law expert Eugene Kontorovich. and he made the very obvious point, the Palestinians simply do not answer the international legal criteria necessary for statehood. And yet more countries are recognizing Palestinian statehood, and that means that their representatives get upgraded to being ambassadors. And I wonder how that feels from your perspective as someone who represents a de facto independent state who isn't given the same international recognition that the Palestinians are increasingly achieving through terrorism.
Yeah, that's we always think the war is not a war between Palestinian civilians and Israeli people. It's a war between two different ideologies, two different civilizations. We support the feasible and workable solutions for peaceful coexistence. And we support the relevant parties to resume the constructive dialogue, and any solution or packages that can be implemented. We don't think that it's the right signal to invite the Fatah or the Hamas leaders to have a peaceful talk in Beijing or in any countries. This will send out the mixed and wrong signals to terrorists, as you mentioned.
And yet your colleague in Brussels has to look on as the Palestinian representative, presents credentials to the king as an ambassador. Well, that is something that is denied to Taiwan.
Yeah, this really is an unjust treatment we receive from the UN, from the international society. But we also know that this is international reality. It's not easy for us to change it immediately, but we are very patient. We are very pragmatic. We have doing a lot to showcase to the international society that we are force for good. We are reliable partners, and we use diverse platforms to prove Taiwan is contributors to global peace, stability, and prosperity. Even though we are excluded from participating in a lot of international organizations, we also find a way to work with international partners and INGOs to contribute to any area that suffer from disasters, suffer from war. We don't see it can be an excuse for Taiwan not to participate from our perspective.
Interesting. You spoke earlier about disinformation and cyber attacks, and I want to go back to that issue because one of the ways that Iran, Russia, and in your context, China have been trying to destabilize the US-led international order is through the spread of disinformation. In Israel, we have suffered from this enormously because of the horrible wave of lies being told around the world that has convinced good, ordinary people that Israel is, God forbid, committing genocide or massive war crimes and not genuinely trying to defend itself from the threat of a repeat October 7th and to bring back the hostages. So I wonder, from your perspective, what are you seeing from this strategy of disinformation? What is China trying to achieve in your region, and what do you think it's trying to achieve here?
Taiwan has been a testing ground for democracy. The other side also make a advantage of abusing the freedom of expression, freedom of speech in liberal society. So we have seen a lot of disinformation activities and campaign happening on our social medias, trying to spread out the distrust of democracy, to send out an idea that democracy doesn't deliver, democracy only lead to chaos, and also spread out distrust of United States. For instance, we just have our national election of president and parliamentary members in January this year. And during the campaign, we have seen a lot of distorted videos of a battlefield in Gaza Strip, and of course unfair to Israeli side. It's a very distorted videos and trying to spread out an idea that if you stand with United States, if you stand with democracy, there will be a war immediately happen in Taiwan.
Hang on, you're saying that China is sharing fabricated videos in Taiwan relating to the war in Gaza in order to try to weaken the relationship between Taiwan and the United States?
I would say China is the main actor of spreading those distorted or edited videos in Taiwan, because we see the coordinated action between the videos on TikTok, for instance, and the video that are used by Chinese state medias. So there's a coordinated actions. For instance, we see those video going viral online first, then the next news cycle, we see this video used by Chinese state media. So it's very clear evidence they are coordinating with each other, trying to spread out the disinformation or to manipulate the voters in Taiwan to vote for the candidate they are in favor of. So we see that a lot of those distorted messages also spread out in Taiwan's internet.
Hang on, so what messages do you think that Beijing is trying to spread within the Taiwanese public about Israel and the Middle East? What are they trying to convince you of?
They're trying to convince us that democratic government cannot control well, and democratic government doesn't function well. That's the first messages they want to spread out. The second message is, of course, the US-led democratic camp is not trustworthy. You always have a better alternative or other actions other than United States.
Interesting. And so I imagine that the Taiwanese are quite well trained in spotting disinformation, foreign influence. Mm-hmm. Tell me, what sort of social media literacy do you have in Taiwan to teach people to spot these signs? And what can we learn maybe from Taiwan? And what can people in other Western countries learn from the Taiwanese experience about how to spot foreign interference and disinformation campaigns?
I think it comes with two layers. First layer is the pre-bunking, and the second layer is the debunking. Pre-bunking is more...
Pre-bunking?
Yeah, pre-bunking.
First time I'm hearing that.
Pre-bunking is increase the media literacy, media competence, and awareness that you are under attack of disinformation or information manipulation. For instance, in our civic education, we incorporate the media literacy, media competence for our young students to teach them you have to be a responsible content contributors online. You cannot be like the helper to reinforce the misinformation. So we do highlight the media literacy and the media competence. You have to be responsible to contribute the content from the education. And also we have a very robust grassroots fact-check mechanism in Taiwan. A lot of civil organizations, they actively creating platforms to invite people in Taiwan to do the fact-check together. It becomes like a popular culture in Taiwan to contribute to the collective efforts to bring the facts back to the society. So this is the pre-bunking part of countering disinformation. The second part is debunking. Of course, when we realize there is a piece of disinformation going viral online, for instance, the government agencies is instructed to we call it a 222 policy. Whenever you realize a piece of disinformation, you have to come out with a press release with 200 words, with 2 photos within 2 hours. Even though our...
Who needs to release this press release?
Like a government. If we see the disinformation going viral online, the government, relevant government agencies have to come out with a clarification. And even though our clarification coming later than the disinformation or rumor online, but because we are the government. So the traditional news will widely report our clarification and our press release. So we know it's important for the government to always come out with clarification in an honest way and in a here manner.
I'm not sure how I feel about the government being the gatekeeper of truth, but I do like the idea of civil society having a sense of a civic duty to report and monitor misinformation. And I think there is a salutary lesson there for Western countries when people consume media, social media, traditional media, to learn to be skeptical that there is always someone who has a vested interest in trying to capture their attention, in trying to change their mind, and trying to really get down to the roots of the problem. I mean, part of our problem is that many of the organizations that people would look to provide truth, UN agencies, human rights organizations, have been completely captured by the rival agenda and aren't sharing truthful information themselves. Talk to me about TikTok. How concerned should Western countries be? I was in Australia recently, and I know that there's talk of possibly banning TikTok because they're concerned about how it could be used by the Chinese Communist Party, because the company ultimately is owned by a Chinese parent company. They don't want to do anything until the United States takes action. But do you think Western countries should be concerned that today's youth are getting all their information from TikTok?
Comparing with other Western democracies, the user base of TikTok is not as huge as other countries.
In Taiwan?
In Taiwan, yes, in Taiwan. About 1/4 of our population installed TikTok, but only 1/10 of those people installed TikTok consider TikTok as their frequent platform for them to use or for them to receive the information. So about 3% to 4% of our population are active TikTok users. Why the number of users in TikTok in Taiwan is much lower than other countries? The major reason is because many years ago, we already identified TikTok is a harmful product to cybersecurity. And cybersecurity is another phase of national security. So for instance, our government agencies cannot install TikTok on our computer or on the cell phone.
Why?
We consider it a harmful product to cybersecurity. We have
Sorry, why would TikTok raise concerns about your cybersecurity? What do you think that app is doing on your phone?
We have a law called the Cybersecurity Management Act. This law said that if a platform, no matter is software, hardware, or it is a service, that can be directly or indirectly manipulated by foreign adversaries, it considered a harmful product for cybersecurity. So that's why we know TikTok is not a neutral platform. Chinese government or Chinese have a huge manipulation or influence over it.
Should the US ban TikTok? Is that Taiwan's policy recommendation?
We are not in a position to comment US policy in TikTok, but I think...
What a diplomatic answer.
But I think from Taiwan's cases, we know that a lot of Taiwanese already when they use TikTok or other software or hardware, they can be controlled by the foreign adversaries. We know there is a threat. We know that we need to use it with caution.
Okay. As Taiwan's senior representative here in Israel, of course, it's your job to share the story of Taiwan and advocate for Taiwan's interests in Israel. But diplomats also serve another role, which is to take experience and expertise from the country they're serving in, take it back home and say, here's what we need to learn in order to advance and develop our own societies. I'm wondering, what are you learning about Israeli society that you think Taiwanese would benefit from back home, and that actually other countries also have to learn from Israeli society and the way that we function?
Yeah, I always consider.
Or do you want to say that actually we have nothing to offer and you can't wait to get back home?
You have many to offer. I always consider myself a collaboration facilitator and a bridge maker across different countries and languages. On the personal and professional level, I think it's really an honor to serve in Israel, especially during this testing and difficult time. And we do have a lot to learn from Israel societies. Economically, we know that our ecosystem and our high-tech structures complement each other. Taiwan is a strong leader in hardware, and Israel is a strong leader in R&D and software design. If we can work together, we can create a synergy beyond our imagination. So I think the economic structure and the corporate culture, the difference is a very different between two countries, but we do have a lot to learn from Israel, the innovative spirit. A lot of entrepreneur, young people pursue the entrepreneurship and always pursue the cutting-edge technologies. And these curiosities and this innovative spirit is what we admire, and we want to learn your successful experience in branding the country as a startup nation. And also the strength and the resilience of a society, that is also what we want to learn from Israel.
Different corporate culture, you mean in Taiwan? You don't shout at each other in the office.
We don't.
You know, in Israel, it's considered rude to let another person complete their sentence.
Yes. Yeah.
Representative Lee, how would you suggest people who want to learn more about Taiwan, what should they do?
Of course, first step, the easier one is to follow our office Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, Taiwan in Israel. And the second step, we welcome Israeli friends to visit Taiwan to experience the pulse of this resilient island, to tasting our world-famous cuisine, but most importantly, to engage our friendly people, our warm people who are working so hard to defend democracy.
Representative Lee, this has been a fascinating discussion to hear from a foreign diplomatic representative specifically about why you think that Israel's security is important to your region. And that's a really valuable perspective to look at what is happening here, not in isolation as the region, but to zoom out at the global picture of geopolitics and see how different threats to international security are connected. Thank you very much for coming on State of a Nation.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode of State of a Nation with Taiwan's representative in Israel, Abby Lee. As always, if you enjoy these episodes, please follow and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a like, give us a good review. Please share the link with a friend who you think will enjoy and be educated by our deep dives beyond the headlines and between the lines. I'm Elon Levy, and thanks for joining us.